So today we're going to discuss inciting incidents, primarily the one for Captain America Civil War, aka the Sokovia Accords. And that's because they're already making headlines due to some very inventive marketing from Marvel. But in that discussion, I want to not only loop in the original inciting incident from the Civil War comics, but I also want to compare it to what's going on in Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice. Of course, the battle for Metropolis in Man of Steel. Because this is my theory, and you're going to see me prove it as we go through my discussion points here, but I feel that Marvel has ended up going the intellectual route, whereas DC has decided to go the emotional route in terms of their inciting incidents. And that's very interesting, not only that they're diverging, but also that Marvel had an emotional route open to them from the comics and decided not to take it. But as I said, the Sokovia Accords are making headlines, so we're going to talk about them first because I not only want to highlight the clever marketing for Marvel, but there's actually some stuff revealed here, which I think is already very interesting. So the Sokovia Accords, how are they getting exposure already? Well, there's two ways. One, Marvel has released the Phase 2 box set, and included is a one-pager for the Sokovia Accords, which is kind of hilarious for a couple of reasons. First, it looks like something that you would get at the gift shop in the UN. You know, like when you buy like a gift shop version of the Constitution or something, and because it looks real light on details. It's certainly not the very thick report that we've seen in the trailer. We'll get to that in a moment. But so I liked it for that reason. It also gives us some interesting information about how far the Sokovia Accords are going, which we'll discuss momentarily. But two other interesting things right off the bat about this is that it has the UN official logo, so I'm really impressed that the UN allowed that to be used. And it just underlines that Marvel is based in the real world. You know, they use real cities, whereas DC continues to operate in their fictional universe with like fictional city names, etc. So, but SHIELD is of course not a real organization, but the UN is. So it's funny that the UN will be in one of the biggest blockbusters of the summer, in a comic book movie, no less. And I think that shows how comic book movies are changing and how people's attitudes toward comic book movies are changing. The UN would be like, hey, we could use the image boost. Although, not after they see what I have to say about making superheroes work for the UN. But anyway, the other thing is, I'm sure you've noticed, are these signature lines. And I think Clint Barton included there. This is basically the lineup from the end of Avengers Age of Ultron, although Anthony Stark is included, but he seems to have taken a break at the end of Avengers Age of Ultron, but I guess they put him on here because he's in the movie, right? They're like, we always include Tony Stark. It's in his contract. But also, I just thought it was hilarious that Vision is here. They're like, how do you get a robot to sign an agreement, right? And would he abide by that? And Vision's like, I guess I have to come up with a signature. It's always fun coming up with your signature. It's something that everybody goes through. I had some help from my sister for mine, so I wonder what Vision's signature would look like. It could be like lots of like just ones and zeros maybe. Who knows? But hilarious. Also, Thor isn't on there, but I guess this is the reason they're not in the movie. Also, these characters aren't in the movie, and I think this underlines the fact that they won't be. Thor and Bruce Banner. So whoever's asked to sign, and then of course Bucky as well there, but he's the fugitive. We're going to talk about Bucky extensively in just a moment, but that's your Avengers basic lineup. So the other way that this was in the news, besides this one pager that was in the Phase 2 box set, was that someone tweeted something very interesting. And they had the Sokovia Accords as well as a SHIELD badge. I don't know how that's still being used. But they have, and you can see the UN logo there as well. But they have the Sokovia Accords, the document from the movie. But this isn't what makes this interesting. What they included with it was what made it really interesting. And this person on Reddit, said, got an advance copy from a contact in Wakanda. This is not good. And I agree with that, by the way, as I stated. So we'll talk about that. But I love the Wakanda reference, and now with the UN logo, I like the international feel. And that might be the best thing that Captain America Civil War brings to the MCU, an international feel. It's a little bit like, after World War II, the U.S. government, because, we'd been so destructive in waging war against the rest of the world, it was a world war, that we, really took out a lot of the infrastructure of other countries, etc. But today, most people have caught up, not only in terms of infrastructure and technology and business, but also, I think, to some degree. I mean, we're still the biggest military in the world, but other countries' militaries have also caught up. So you're kind of creating like a metaphor here or analogy where superheroes, other countries have caught up in superheroes, right? And America is no longer the only country through S.H.I.E.L.D. to have superheroes. And so I think that would be great. And there's a little bit of an international feel when you think about it. Not only Wakanda with Black Panther, but perhaps Martin Freeman's character was brought in from the UK to head up this new UN initiative. So I think that's probably, and because I have problems with the rest of this, but I think that could be a really good move for Marvel, not only in widening the appeal of their movies, but even further the box office reach. And also spin-off movies potentially. Also Black Panther therefore would have a more international feel because it's not an America-based movie. That would also be very cool. All right, so anyway, let's get into the actual Sokovia Accords, which now we understand how far they're going to go. Because there's one line here on this one pager that says, I have it written down here just so I can see it better, that the superheroes would be acting only when and if the panel deems it appropriate and or necessary. That to me is a big deal breaker, because I thought that the Superhero Registration Act, as it did in the comics, was only going to hold superheroes accountable for their behavior and monitor them, right? A little bit like S.H.I.E.L.D. did. I mean, S.H.I.E.L.D. would give them tips and everything and offer support, but there was no one, telling them what they could and could not do. But what this does is it really turns them into UN peacekeepers. And with all due respect to the UN, they don't have the best track record with shows of force. I mean, they do a good job. Well, I don't know. That's a very difficult political discussion, and I hope Marvel doesn't get in trouble potentially getting themselves involved in that. But I think that making superheroes, and it says only when and if it's appropriate and or necessary, that makes superheroes seem like a last resort. And when you have supervillains, sometimes evil plans need to be shut down right away. And if you wait until the last minute to bring in your big guns, there could be a lot of destruction and loss it's not necessary. So I thought it was just accountability and monitoring. I don't like the UN running the superhero team. So this is my counter. It's a little bit like what came out of the actual Civil War comics with the 52 state initiative, with each state having its own superhero team that operated within that state. I think that they should make superheroes like an extension of the military, kind of like, almost like S.H.I.E.L.D. And while they're self-policed with their government, whatever relationship the superheroes want to have with that government, you operate within your own borders, right? So Black Panther operates over in Wakanda, but the other, I guess they can decide what they want to do about Wanda Maximoff. Black Widow, I guess superheroes can be for hire and move from country to country, but basically each country has its own superhero team that do whatever they want, within their borders. And then if there's an international situation like they had in Sokovia, then there can be some sort of coalition, just like we have today with actual armed forces. So, but then also at the same time, I guess, just like militaries do in the real world, a country could decide to act independently, but it would perhaps be considered an act of war. That's very interesting. This is very dry, by the way, and we're going to address that. It's like, let's go, hey kids, do you want to buy your Captain America Civil War, Accords, fun pack? What would you put in as in the revisions, and what would you put on as an add-on? So I think it teaches you about government, I guess, but that's crazy dry. So this is intellectual, right? So I'm following my notes here, and we're gonna move into this. Now, no matter what anyone says, and this is why the Sokovia Accords are intellectual. You might be like, but Grace, it's horribly emotional. It pulls on the old heartstrings. But here's why it doesn't. The Sokovia situation in Avengers Age of Ultron, no matter what anybody tries to say after the event in Captain America Civil War, as far as the audience is concerned, no one died during that altercation except for an Avenger, and it wasn't even one of the main Avengers, right? So I don't think anybody watched Avengers Age of Ultron and was like, wow, what a devastating situation. I feel so bad for the people of Sokovia. You were like, it was kind of like, and we don't even know the name of that city, by the way. It was just Sokovian capital, like insert nameless Eastern European city here, which Hollywood does all the time. It's one of their favorite things to do these days because there are such, location-friendly, filming situations in Eastern Europe. But, nobody felt any emotional connection to Sokovia, and we didn't see anyone die. We just saw people being saved again and again and again. So the audience there's no emotional situation there. Now let's transfer. This is where I want to go actually to Battle for Metropolis, because this is the exact opposite situation where people watched Zod and Superman throw down at the end of Man of Steel, and all on their own were like, That's horrible. That's horribly irresponsible. Somebody should call Superman out on that. Superman wouldn't do it. He would, and then some people countered, well, Superman's inexperienced, so he wouldn't know to move the fight away from a popularized area. But we saw how horrible the destruction was, and how Metropolis, a lot of it, was just completely cratered. The buildings came down, and it was made very clear that there were people in those buildings and under the buildings when they fell down. So the Batman v Superman Dawn of Justice whole setup that Batman feels that Superman needs to be held accountable and brought to heel, and that the Senate wants to talk to Superman, and they have that memorial in Metropolis, but people are upset and spray paint false god on it. That's all a response to the audience's response, right? Like the audience told that franchise where to go. So we want to have this discussion. So it's very emotional, and it's something that the audience is leading, whereas we're following Marvel, and we don't know maybe if we want to follow them in that very dry intellectual discussion. Everybody knows Metropolis. Also, that's a major city where it's not been made clear to us what the ramifications were of the Sokovia disaster, right? Sokovia doesn't seem to be a major world player now, and nobody seems to have been hurt. So, let's get some money together and build them a new city, right? I'm very, very, very trying to be very sensitive to our Eastern European friends, but I think that you have to be realistic, especially because the movie's trying to be so realistic as to what would actually happen in an international debate with the governments and the people of the world, right? Just think about what you read in CNN, the New York Times, any news source that hasn't become too tabloidy, which is hard to find these days. So I think that the Batman v Superman inciting incident is very emotional. Now, as I said, Marvel had a very emotional path open to them from the comics, because in the comics, I'll give you a quick rundown of what happened in the comics to incite civil war there. There was a reality show filming with some real sea-level heroes, superpowered individuals. And they were more concerned with ratings and getting great footage than actually, being responsible superheroes. And as a result of that behavior, they went after some supervillains who were, hiding out after escaping from prison, I believe, or just were wanted by the law. And they, bit off more than they could chew, this reality show. And so one of those supervillains blew himself up, because that was his superpower, in a residential neighborhood, and not only took out several blocks with homes in them, but a school. Actually, he did it right outside of a school. Now, I can understand why Kevin Feige was like, I don't want a bunch of dead kids in Captain America Civil War. I'm trying to make family-friendly movies here. I don't want to go dark. I said that specifically. But I think that I hope that it was worth the trade-off for losing such a strong emotional hook, because when that was done in the comics, it made everybody have to pay attention to it. It wasn't like, sorry, Sokovia, why are we making a big deal about Sokovia? It was like dead kids. So, that was really particularly affected Tony Stark, and was, much more so than Cap's not my friend anymore. Now, I feel very bad for Tony Stark, but I was surprised at the reaction to the first trailer for the movie, where people weren't really feeling that. They were like, Cap and Tony no longer being friends means nothing to me, especially because I don't think they ever really were friends. Now, that's a whole nother discussion, but that emotional hook, the two emotional hooks that they've tried to put in here are Cap and Tony no longer being friends fighting friends, and also Bucky, right? So that's how they've decided to try and raise the stakes. But the school blowing up, that is raising the stakes, I think, expertly. That's like one of the oldest tricks in storytelling, raise the stakes. And that raises the stakes for everyone. It really forces everyone to put themselves in this very difficult position. But now you're like, I don't know Bucky. Nobody really knows Bucky. Cap knows Bucky, but just kind of like with Prim in the Hunger Games movies, Marvel hasn't done the work. They haven't sowed the seeds to make us care about Bucky. Bucky's a cool action character. He was very cool in The Winter Soldier, but who felt bad when Bucky fell off that train in Captain America First Avenger? I think hardly anyone. And unless Captain America Civil War in the beginning of the movie can do some major character development for Bucky, I just don't see audiences being like, protect Bucky. Aside from, there are a few Bucky fans, to be fair, and of course there are those Cap Bucky shippers who care about both of them quite a bit, and are going to love all the pseudo romantic scenes. Or some people say it's not pseudo. They say there's genuine romantic tension there. They have to be careful there with these emotions running high in these comic book movies, because Batman v Superman just had the same problem with that sneak peek that they released. Or some people say same awesomeness. So we'll see. There's always been a fun shipping aspect to these comic book movies. Just spend some time on Tumblr. But anyway, that's my feeling about inciting incidents for these movies. So in short, the Sokovia Accords, now that they've been brought to light, I'm actually against them. I think they're a very bad idea. I don't, like so many government things, good idea, poor execution. But I think that the dry intellectual approach for Marvel could backfire because I don't think that anyone demanded it. Whereas I think Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice is an entire movie answering a problem that people had with Man of Steel. It's like they basically took a negative and turned it into a positive, and that's impressive right there. All right, so I'm curious, what do you think of these inciting incidents? What do you think of the path Marvel took versus the one they decided not to take with the comics? And also, what do you think of it compared to the inciting incident for Batman v Superman: Dawn of Justice? And how do you feel about the Sokovia Accords now that you know a little bit more about them? And then finally, what do you think of adding a more international feel to the MCU, Marvel Cinematic Universe? All right, thanks so much for watching, and you can check out some other episodes right now.